Percussion and voice have a special relationship. In terms of development, singing is the first music making a young child is physically able to do, and percussion is the second. In terms of history, percussion and voice are the oldest, most basic instruments. They are the instruments that humans can perform on with only their own bodies. This combination is pervasive across musical history, from the music of indigenous peoples in the Americas and across the sea, to spirituals, to modern choral music, etc. In my humble opinion, voice and percussion affect people in ways that other instruments cannot. The nuanced expression of the human voice presents innumerable possibilities, and I'm biased, but percussionists can make the most evocative music. Percussion involves such varied and dynamic movements, timbres, and textures that we are painting with a broader and more nuanced palette than anybody else. The incredibly varied timbres of percussion make it a fabulous instrument for accompanying the spoken word. In addition, other instrument families that may offer the same timbral variety cannot be performed by the speaker as they speak. So in a bit, I'll be playing a percussion and spoken word piece for you. But first I'm going to go through some pieces and some concepts in and adjacent to the speaking percussionist genre, just to get a better perspective on this magical pairing. Percussion and spoken word seems to be an even more robust genre than music for a singing percussionist. Why is that? There are a few factors. It could be that people who are inclined to write for percussion naturally want to express their text in a way where the percussion carries the text. It may also be because percussionists are often not as inclined as other instrumentalists to sing. There are obviously many wonderful vocalist percussionists, but when I've asked my percussionist colleagues to sing, I've received a shake the head no and tightly closed lips on multiple occasions. Also, creating an artful spoken execution of a text, in my mind, is not unlike phrasing on a snare drum. A beginner may play or speak the material flatly, each syllable or note the same timbre and volume as the others. As the student hears more of the sounds that are possible on the instrument in question, they learn how to manipulate the timbre in action. Other instrumentalists, for the most part, do not spend time learning to phrase beautiful music on a single note to the extent a snare drummer must. It makes sense then that percussionists would be the most inclined to employ and mess with the cadence of the unpitched voice in their music. Another reason for the prominence of the spoken word in percussion music may be the percussion community's apparent love for coordination challenges. How many times have you seen a multiple percussion setup in a solo or ensemble setting where each of the players' four mouths is a different type? What's the maximum number of pedals you've seen on a drum set or drum set adjacent setup? In Abby Fisher's TEDx talk on her experience with the genre of percussion and spoken word, she performs Lawton Hall's All Your Thens for Now. This piece sees the performer playing four-mouth vibraphone, speaking, and using a foot pedal to take pictures, with the flash on, of course. Percussionists seem to have this innate desire to do as many things at once as they can, which gives composers license to go wild. The genre of the talking instrumentalist really emerged in the classical music space in the 1970s. Some composers who are part of this emergence were Frederic Rzewski on piano, Bertram Turetsky on double bass, and Stuart Dempster on trombone. Another composer that percussionists may think of in relation to this genre is John Cage. Now, Cage didn't compose anything specifically for a solo-speaking percussionist, and the bulk of his career was before the emergence of the genre. He was about 20 years older than the aforementioned three composers, but he is well known for his inventive use of percussion and speaking. Not only do percussionists often perform his spoken works, such as the second movement of living room music, but modern derivations and interpretations of his work often result in spoken word and percussion colliding. A prime example of this is Bonnie Whiting's 51 minutes and 15.657 seconds for a speaking percussionist. Cage had suggested on multiple occasions that his pieces could be performed simultaneously, such as his 45 minutes for a speaker and his 27 minutes and 10.554 seconds for a percussionist. Whiting combines these two chance-determined pieces in the longest track on her album, John Cage, Music for a Speaking Percussionist. The pieces mentioned so far are more along the lines of high art, but percussion and spoken word has been used extensively for more accessible purposes too. The example that comes to mind is Corey Hills. In 2010, he created a program called Percussive Storytelling in order to bring classical music and storytelling to kids in fun and accessible ways. When he performs, he tells a story and accompanies himself with a multiple percussion setup. Several of his stories are familiar to a wide audience, whether they are common children's stories like John Henry or widespread summer camp songs like Button Factory, renamed to Drum Factory in his performance. There are also some lesser-known folk tales in his repertoire, like the Appalachian tale, I'm My Own Grandpa. Corey's reasoning for creating this program is really interesting. He noticed the audience was dwindling for concerts featuring experimental percussion, and he grew frustrated with the disconnect between the art, the audience, and himself. He says that the beauty of percussive storytelling is that anyone can do it anywhere. This obviously bears a stark contrast to some of the other pieces I've mentioned. Corey's percussive storytelling is a marriage of vernacular and cultivated traditions through accessible yet modern performance. It's a really beautiful example of the bond between percussion and voice. This classically trained percussionist combines traditions to create art that is relevant to a wide audience. An adjacent phenomenon that also connects voice and percussion, which I believe is worth mentioning, is pieces that are written for vocalists or for which vocals are the main form of expression being primarily performed by percussionists. Take the piece Aphasia by Mark Applebaum, for example. This piece is written to be performed by a singer, but the performer does not make any noise themselves. They perform gestures, described by the composer as an invented nonsense sign language, along to a track. The track is actually all remixed vocals from a baritone singer named Nicholas Isherwood. I thought about why percussionists may be drawn to this piece in particular. Aphasia was meant to be a metaphor for expressive paralysis, something Applebaum says he faces whenever he confronts the terror of composing a new piece. The foundation of this piece is the fact that the singer is not able to engage in their preferred manner of expression. They are silent and vainly attempt to express through a different medium. This medium, however, is very close to percussion, so a percussionist would feel much more prepared to perform it. A percussionist would also feel more prepared to tackle the notation. Its notation is novel, to say the least, with boxes with symbols representing the motions and lines drawn to connect them to the rhythms notated above. Music school often doesn't prepare a vocalist for this. A vocalist can go years only making music off of standard notation scores. Percussionists, on the other hand, have to read off of unusual notation much sooner. Both solo and ensemble works can have a unique multiple percussion setup that requires a notation key, or weird instructions for visual and logistical components, and so on. It's wild that percussionists and vocalists, considered by some to be radically different types of people, could be drawn to the same pieces for similar or different reasons. Every intersection of repertoire along this vein is unique and fun to talk about. I wish I had more time to dive into some other ones, like Retrouvailles by Georges Apergis and Ursonata by Kurt Schwitters, but I guess I gotta make another video about that. So I've bounced around a bunch and only managed to cover a little sliver of what there is to say about this topic. I've mentioned why I think percussion and voice work together so well, why percussion gets paired with spoken word more in new solo works than singing, the start of the talking instrumentalist genre, and a couple repertoire examples and their significance. The point of all this is, there are some instrumentalists that, through their choice of instrument, have been given the gift of the ability to vocalize while playing. There are some singer-songwriter instruments like piano and guitar that are much more prevalent in their use cases, but I think that percussion has made the best use of this gift through its love affair with both poetry and innovation, which has materialized as this genre. So as I play a piece of this genre for you, movements 1 and 2 of Three Winter Carols by Stuart Saunders Smith, think about why this piece has been written for this genre. If the composer wanted to convey this feeling, set these words in a different way, how would he do it? Could any other instrumentation accomplish the same feeling as this? The sun is rising out of the snow. White lace swirls out the window. Is this world too big for you? So many of us have gone the way of winter. Some longing to overcome time, to age and not to age. The people of winter carry their heat with them. The people of winter close their eyes and see white. The angels of winter come for us in the night.